January 2nd, 2016. Less than 24 hours after taking office, Temixco's first female mayor was shot dead in her own home. The shockwaves from that morning would ignite fear and reveal the deadly stakes of standing against organized crime. Here are 5 times women messed with the wrong cartels and paid with their lives.
Alcanza a cruzar la calle en dirección al palacio, pero su agresor la alcanza en la banqueta y le dispara a la cabeza.
December 16th, 2010. Marisela Escobedo stands in front of the Chihuahua government palace, holding a sign demanding justice for her murdered daughter. For 2 years, she had traveled across Mexico, searching, investigating, and demanding accountability. But that day ended with a single gunshot. A mother's relentless pursuit of justice cut short by the very system she fought against. Marisela Escobedo Ortiz wasn't a politician or a lawyer. She was a nurse and small business owner from Ciudad Juarez, a mother driven by unbearable loss. In August 2008, her daughter, Ruby Marisol Freire, disappeared. Marisela's world was shattered, but she refused to let her daughter's case become just another statistic in Mexico's escalating femicide crisis. Her investigation led to Ruby's boyfriend, Sergio Rafael Barraza Bocanegra, a member of the Los Zetas cartel. Against all odds, Marisela tracked him down in Zacatecas. He confessed to the murder in court, describing how he Ruby and burned her remains. But then the Chihuahua court did the unthinkable. They acquitted him, citing a lack of evidence despite his confession.
El tribunal absuelve por unanimidad a Sergio Rafael Barraza Bocanegra de la acusación que le hizo el Ministerio Público como autor del delito.
And the judge's decision ignited a firestorm. The only evidence, Barraza's confession, was deemed inadmissible. The court released him and Marisela watched her daughter's confessed killer walk free. That moment transformed her from a grieving mother to an activist. Her fight was no longer just about Ruby. It became a battle against a broken justice system protecting murderers instead of victims. Marisela launched a nationwide campaign, traveling from city to city, holding protests and sit-ins, demanding justice for her daughter and other victims. She exposed corruption, incompetence, and the terrifying power of organized crime over Mexico's institutions. Her courage inspired countless women, but it also made her a target. In May 2010, a higher court overturned the acquittal and sentenced Barraza to 50 years in prison, while he remained a fugitive. Marisela continued her crusade, now demanding his capture. She traveled to Mexico City, seeking an audience with President Felipe Calderón. The meeting never happened. Instead, she returned to Chihuahua and began a sit-in protest outside the government palace. For 8 days, Marisela camped outside the palace, refusing to leave until justice was served. She knew the risks. She had received multiple death threats. But she told reporters,
"Let them kill me here, in front of the palace, so everyone can see what happens when you demand justice in Mexico."
On December 16, 2010, as night fell, a man approached her protest camp. Without warning, he shot Marisela in the head. Execution style. The state that failed her daughter now failed her too, unable or unwilling to protect a mother demanding justice. Marisela's murder sent shockwaves across Mexico. Her death became a symbol of the state's failure to protect women and punish their killers. The government promised investigations and reforms, but justice remained elusive. Her killer walked free for years until a cartel shootout in 2012 ended his life. But Marisela's legacy endures. Her story inspired documentaries, songs, and protests. She became a martyr for Mexico's femicide victims, a mother whose courage exposed the ugly truth about justice in a country plagued by violence and corruption. Her story is far from the only example of courage met with violence. Messing with the wrong cartel in Mexico comes at a heavy cost. And as you'll see in the next case, sometimes standing up to the cartels brings consequences no one could have predicted.
Mourners have turned out in large numbers following the murder of Mexico City Mayor Gisela Mota, who was gunned down at home by 4 attackers just 1 day after taking office.
January 2nd, 2016. Just a day into her term as the first female mayor of Temixco, Gisela Raquel Mota Ocampo was shot dead in her own home. 4 armed men broke in early morning, dragging her from bed and killing her within moments, right where her nephew lay nearby. Gisela was 33 years old, young and determined, a rising politician who had just sworn in and declared war on organized crime in her municipality. Temixco, a town long plagued by cartel violence and corruption, was no place for anyone willing to challenge the status quo. Born and raised in Pueblo Viejo, a small village within Temixco, Gisela came from humble roots. Her father was a carpenter. Her mother was a political activist who introduced her to politics and protests at the age of 12. By 2012, she had secured a seat in Mexico's Congress, representing Morelos. Then, in June 2015, she shocked many by winning the mayoral race against entrenched powers, promising to clean house and fight the criminal gangs suffocating her community. The pressure was immense. Temixco sits in Morelos, one of Mexico's deadliest states, where 2 major gangs, Los Rojos and Guerreros Unidos, battle for control. Gisela's platform was clear: no more deals with these cartels. She vowed to cut corruption, reform police forces, and reject extortion. It was a bold stance in a place where mayors often cooperate or are silenced. Her inauguration wasn't just ceremonial, it was a declaration of war. Hours after taking office, she publicly pledged to root out corrupt officials and dismantle cartel influence. But that same night, unknown men were already planning her demise. The morning after her swearing in, 7 masked gunmen stormed her modest home. Her mother was awake and saw the killers shouting, demanding to know which woman was Gisela. The family was forced at gunpoint to lie on the floor as the assassins searched for their target. When Gisela identified herself, they dragged her to the doorway and fired several shots at her head. Then, just minutes later, they fled, leaving behind a community in shock and a body that would soon become a symbol of resistance and tragedy.
It's one of the 2 gangs that are fighting for control of that municipality. Los Rojos versus Guerreros Unidos.
3 suspects were arrested that same day, with police killing 2 of the gunmen in a shootout. Authorities linked the killing to the Los Rojos cartel, reportedly paying around $29,000 to execute her. The motive? Gisela's refusal to negotiate or allow cartel operations within her jurisdiction. But the murder wasn't just an act of retaliation, it was a chilling message. Organized crime was telling other politicians, don't follow her example. Her death unleashed a wave of grief across Temixco and beyond. Thousands turned out for her funeral. Candles and flowers covered the bullet-ridden floor where she died. Citizens chanted, Gisela vive, a vow that her fight wouldn't be forgotten, even as fear gripped the town. Local officials criticized the government for failing to protect her, pointing to decades of corruption and lawlessness. The governor of Morelos ordered flags at half-mast and called for heightened security for municipal leaders, but many feared it was too little, too late. Gisela's murder also intensified political battles. Her support for the controversial single-command police reform aimed to wrest control of municipal police from local gangs and corrupt officials. The policy was divisive, one layer of a complex struggle between state authorities, local politicians, and criminal groups. Some rumors swirled that her death was more than a cartel hit. Whispers of rivalries and broken pacts complicated the picture. Yet her family and close allies insist she never cowered, never gave in to threats. Her mother said,
If they want to kill me, they can kill me first. But she said, I am Gisela. They took her because she was important.
Sadly, Gisela's assassination was far from an isolated tragedy. In the decade before her death, almost 100 elected officials across Mexico were assassinated. It's a brutal pattern where public service becomes a death sentence if you cross the wrong criminal networks. The state of Morelos remains a battleground. Los Rojos and Guerreros Unidos continue their fight for dominance, leaving towns like Temixco caught in the crossfire. Political reforms aimed at curbing corruption face fierce resistance, and the public's demand for justice often clashes with the harsh realities of cartel control. In the aftermath, Gisela's family faced threats, and her political allies struggled to fill the void she left. The message was clear. In places like Temixco, standing up to cartels is deadly. But that did not silence the spirit of those who mourned her. The outcry sparked calls for change, for tougher government action, and for the courage to continue her fight. If you think that kind of courage is rare, wait until you hear about the next woman who challenged a cartel and paid the price, but in a way that shocked everyone.
Una predicción que se cumplió. Hoy callaron la voz de la periodista Miroslava para siempre. 2 hombres la atacaron. Era corresponsal del periódico La Jornada y trabajaba para el norte de Ciudad Juárez. Su voz era crítica y defensora de derechos humanos.
The morning of March 23, 2017 felt ordinary for Miroslava Breach. She climbed into her red Renault SUV, ready to take her son to school. A daily routine she never imagined would be broken by violence. 8 gunshots later, Breach became another silenced voice in Mexico's war against journalists. Breach was no ordinary reporter. With a career spanning over 20 years, she fearlessly investigated the dangerous intersection of politics, corruption, and organized crime in Chihuahua. She worked for La Jornada, El Norte de Chihuahua, and previously directed El Norte de Ciudad Juárez. Her reporting uncovered how cartels infiltrated local government and exposed connections between security officials and criminal syndicates like Los Salazar, a faction tied to the Sinaloa cartel. Her courage came at a cost. In 2016, Breach began receiving threats, a clear warning to stop her investigations into violent displacements in the Sierra Tarahumara and the growing cartel influence in rural politics. But for Miroslava, silence equaled complicity. She pressed on, believing truth-telling was non-negotiable, even as death threats circled closer to her family. The investigation into her murder revealed chilling details. The hit was carefully planned and executed by Los Salazar, who felt betrayed by her reporting on their political infiltration. But Miroslava's work exposed more than just cartel activities. It threatened to unravel the entire web of corruption enabling organized crime in northern Mexico. Investigators discovered that former Mayor Hugo Ahmed Schultz Alcaraz played a critical role in facilitating the crime. He delivered an audio recording of Breach to Los Salazar, hoping to clear his name, but instead sealing her fate. For this, he received an 8-year prison sentence. 3 direct perpetrators were identified. Juan Carlos Moreno Ochoa, known as El Larry, orchestrated the murder and received 51 years in prison. The presumed shooter, Ramon Andres Zavala, was killed months later, a reminder that in cartel violence, witnesses rarely survive. Wilbert Yaciel Vega Villa, the suspected getaway driver, remains a fugitive. But the true mastermind, Crispin Salazar, remains at large, a painful symbol of the impunity that still plagues Mexico's justice system. Miroslava's murder sent shockwaves through Mexico's press community. She was the 3rd journalist killed that month, highlighting the escalating crisis of violence against reporters. Every detail of her assassination, from the 8 precisely fired 9mm rounds to the threatening note left at the scene, underscored the calculated nature of the attack. Despite clear evidence of threats and corruption, the investigation was marred by failures. Key leads were ignored, evidence mishandled, and crucial witnesses silenced. Politicians with known connections to organized crime were never interviewed. The case file leaked to the media, distracting public attention from the search for justice. The broader context is even more alarming. Since December 2012, over 100 journalists have been killed in Mexico, with 99.75% of cases remaining unsolved. Miroslava's murder was not an isolated incident, but part of a systematic campaign to silence investigative journalism. But her legacy endures. Forbidden Stories, an international consortium of journalists, continued her investigations, exposing even more of the criminal political nexus she died uncovering. The The Miroslava Breach Award was established to honor journalists covering violence and education in Latin America. Protests erupted across Mexico, demanding an end to the impunity of killing journalists. Colleagues vowed to continue her work, refusing to let intimidation silence the truth. The special prosecutor for crimes against freedom of expression took over the case, but justice remains incomplete. 8 years later, Miroslava's sisters unveiled a mural in Mexico City, a powerful reminder that her voice still resonates. While some perpetrators face justice, the mastermind's freedom is a stark reminder of the challenges journalists face in exposing cartel corruption. In our next story, another journalist faces a more brutal end in the hands of the cartels.
Hundreds of protesters in the Mexican state of Veracruz have marked the anniversary of the death of a journalist they claim was murdered because of her work. Regina Martinez often wrote about drug trafficking and alleged links with the Mexican authorities.
The year was 2012. Veracruz, once considered a haven for journalists, had become the deadliest state in Mexico for the press. Regina Martinez, a veteran investigative reporter for Proceso, dared to expose politicians' ties with drug cartels and corruption that stained every level of government. Her work would make her a target, and her murder would ignite a movement that continues to this day. Regina Martinez wasn't just another journalist. She was known across Mexico for her fearless reporting on organized crime and government corruption, particularly in Veracruz. Her investigations focused on the two most powerful governors of the state, Fidel Herrera and Javier Duarte, both accused of turning Veracruz into a cartel stronghold. Martinez uncovered mass graves, exposed corrupt officials, and revealed the dark connections between politicians and drug traffickers. Her reporting was relentless, her sources impeccable, and her integrity unquestioned. In April 2012, Regina was working on a major expose about mass graves used by cartels to dispose of bodies. She had already published reports exposing corrupt police, cartel leaders, and politicians' connections with organized crime. Colleagues noticed her growing concerns about surveillance, strange echoes on her phone, evidence of her apartment being searched while she was away. She confessed to her boss that she planned to stop covering cartel stories due to safety concerns, but her dedication to truth kept her pushing forward. On April 28, 2012, everything changed. Regina was found beaten and strangled in her bathroom, her work laptop missing, her last investigation unpublished. Initial reports claimed robbery, but key evidence told a different story. Valuable items were left behind, while only her phone, computer, and TV were taken. The official investigation quickly focused on a narrative of crime of passion and robbery gone wrong, ignoring the mounting evidence that her murder was connected to her reporting. But the truth couldn't be silenced. Journalists, activists, and citizens immediately recognized the pattern, a pattern of silencing critical voices through violence and intimidation. Protests erupted across Mexico, with powerful symbolism on display. Cameras were laid on the ground as memorials. Red paint symbolized the blood of murdered journalists, and skeletons held signs declaring,
"You don't kill the truth by killing journalists."
Despite overwhelming evidence pointing to a targeted killing, the official investigation quickly fell apart.
Una investigación que no convence a nadie, una investigación que, vamos, si así investigan todos los crímenes en el país, pues por eso estamos con este 98% de impunidad. Es increíble la...
The main suspect, Jorge Antonio Hernandez Silva, confessed under duress but later recanted, claiming torture and threats against his family. Forensic evidence didn't match any known suspects, and the investigation relied solely on the coerced confession. Authorities refused to consider Regina's journalism as a possible motive, instead pushing a narrative of personal conflict and robbery. The response from the journalistic community was swift and united. Protests filled the streets, with activists demanding accountability and an end to impunity. Powerful visuals, red cards with journalists' names, symbolic cameras, and blood-stained crosses became the language of resistance. The message was clear: you don't kill the truth by killing journalists. Regina's murder became a turning point in the fight for press freedom in Mexico. It exposed the deep corruption within the justice system, where 98% of crimes against journalists go unpunished. Her case highlighted the pattern of silencing critical voices through violence, intimidation, and manipulated investigations. The protests grew beyond her case, demanding protection for all journalists and accountability for those who attack the press. International organizations joined the call for justice. The Committee to Protect Journalists, Reporters Without Borders, and UNESCO condemned the investigation's flaws and demanded a transparent, credible inquiry. International pressure grew as Regina's case became a symbol of Mexico's press freedom crisis. Her murder sparked new legislation, including a law making attacks on journalists a federal crime and establishing protection measures for reporters. But despite these reforms, the culture of impunity persisted. Regina's case remains unsolved, her killers still protected by a system designed to silence truth-tellers. Years later, her memory continues to inspire journalists across Mexico. Her unfinished work, The Investigation into Mass Graves, became a rallying point for those still fighting for truth and justice. Regina's legacy lives on in every journalist who refuses to be silenced, every protest demanding accountability, and every story that exposes corruption and violence. The movement she inspired created a wall of memory honoring all murdered and disappeared journalists. Each name added to the list is a reminder of the price paid for truth in Mexico. Regina's story became more than just one woman's tragedy. It became the symbol of a nation's struggle for press freedom and justice. Recent years have seen some progress. New laws mandate federal investigations into attacks on journalists, and international attention has forced some accountability measures.
The issue's become so serious, Mexico's Congress has just passed a bill making a federal investigation mandatory into assaults on reporters.
But the culture of impunity remains strong, and Regina's case continues to represent the unfinished work of protecting freedom of expression in Mexico. If you think Regina's case was powerful, wait until you see what happened when an activist decided to confront the cartels directly. The next story will show just how far some will go to silence the truth.
¿Cuántos estudiantes, cuántos defensores, cuántos activistas, defensores de derechos humanos han sido asesinados, levantados, desaparecidos?
That was Nadia Vera in a past interview. This was months before her brutal murder, alongside Ruben Espinosa and 3 other women in a Mexico City apartment. Vera's words now echo as a chilling premonition and a reminder of the risks faced by those who challenge power in Mexico. Vera, a social anthropologist from Chiapas, was deeply involved in student activism at the University of Veracruz. She joined the Yo Soy 132 movement, organized protests for justice, and became a prominent voice against corruption and violence. Her activism put her squarely in the crosshairs of powerful interests, especially after she directly accused Veracruz Governor Javier Duarte of threatening her life. In 2014, Vera participated in a documentary titled Veracruz, La Fosa Olvidada, or The Forgotten Mass Grave. On camera, she spoke with remarkable composure about the rising tide of disappearances in Veracruz since Duarte became governor.
The number of disappearances begins to rise when Javier Duarte becomes governor,
she stated plainly. Vera detailed how young people became targets for both organized crime and state repression, describing how
the narcos who govern this state, the Zetas who literally manipulate the state.
She ended her interview with a clear warning.
We want to make very clear that our security is totally the state's responsibility, because they are the ones who send people to repress us.
Vera's activism made her a frequent target. In 2012, she attended a demonstration demanding justice for assassinated journalists and was beaten and detained by police. Her home was ransacked while she was out. She witnessed friends and colleagues disappear or get murdered. Eventually, the threats became unbearable, and she decided to move to Mexico City, hoping for safety. The capital had long been considered a refuge for journalists and activists, fleeing violence in other states. But safety proved an illusion. On July 31st, 2015, Vera, photojournalist Ruben Espinosa, and 3 other women were found murdered execution-style in an apartment in Colonia Narvarte. All 5 were shot in the head with the same 9mm weapon. The murder scene showed clear signs of professional execution. Both Vera and Espinosa had reported threats from Duarte's government. Espinosa had recently taken a controversial photograph of Duarte for Proceso magazine, which reportedly angered the governor. Despite the obvious political context, authorities quickly labeled the crime a robbery, yet they couldn't specify what, if anything, had been stolen. Journalist Daniela Pastrana, in a later interview, expressed disbelief at the official version, noting the clear pattern of threats against both Vera and Espinosa. The supposed robbery motive fell apart under scrutiny. The murder weapon was clean, never used in any known crime before. The 3 arrested suspects, 2 street performers and an ex-convict, seemed unlikely to possess such a weapon or carry out such a sophisticated execution. The investigation soon became a case study in cover-ups and contradictions. Prosecutor General Rodolfo Rios initially insisted Espinosa hadn't been killed as a journalist, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Multiple witness statements and camera footage contradicted the official timeline. DNA evidence suggested more than 3 perpetrators, but leads were ignored. Key surveillance cameras were conveniently broken. The crime scene was compromised and information was selectively leaked to discredit the victims. Victim blaming became a tactic. Authorities and sympathetic media began spreading rumors about the female victims, implying involvement in drugs or prostitution, classic attempts to defame and distract. But Vera's life contradicted these smears. She was an artist, poet, and activist dedicated to justice and human rights. Her mother, Mirta Luz Perez Robledo, a renowned poet, wrote a heart-wrenching poem for her daughter after the murder, expressing the collective grief and loss felt by many. Thousands marched in protest after the murders, demanding justice. Human rights organizations called for a proper investigation, recognizing the clear pattern of targeting journalists and activists. But impunity prevailed. The Mexican justice system, already notorious for its failures, seemed determined to protect powerful interests rather than seek truth. Veracruz, under Duarte, had become the most dangerous state for journalists in Mexico. Espinosa's murder marked the first time a displaced journalist was killed after fleeing threats. The message was clear: nowhere was safe. Vera's murder became the 36th killing of a woman human rights defender in Mexico since 2010. Attacks on journalists and activists nearly doubled between 2013 and 2014. State authorities were responsible for 87% of attacks against women human rights defenders. The pattern was unmistakable. As women activists became more prominent, violence against them increased. The state-sponsored repression aimed not just to silence individuals, but to intimidate entire movements. Yet, as Vera herself predicted, their voices would not be silenced.
When there is almost nothing left, what we have is to defend the memory and to not become insensitive to the normalization of violence.
Her mother later wrote, Vera's legacy endures in the continued fight for justice. Her father, speaking at her funeral, expressed hope that her death would become a turning point for change.
Good things cannot be ended. She was a beautiful girl, and they killed her. It will take a long time to close this wound of mine,
he said. Her mother's poetry and her own creative work continue to inspire others.